Welcome to today's stream, and thanks for taking the time to join in our online learning together. If you're just joining in for the first time, or you're connecting back in after some time, we're currently in a series called A Community of Exiles, and we're looking at Jeremiah's words to the people of Israel in exile in Babylon from Jeremiah 29, which we'll be doing over the next few weeks. You may well be joining us for the first time, and if so, welcome. We are currently exploring what it means for us to begin to meet in groups in person again, and that'll become clearer in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, I'd encourage you to sign up for our weekly news that goes out towards the end of each week. To sign up for that, you just need to go to the homepage of our website, gordonbaptist.org.au, and sign up for the e-news, selecting English as your language group. If you're part of community, you'd hopefully already get these emails. And these emails include an order of service that we send out each week to walk us through our worship together as community. This order of service includes a number of things, including suggested prayers, readings, an opportunity to take communion together with whoever you're walking through that order of service with, or to do on your own. There's some suggested discussion questions to facilitate a conversation after the video, whether in person or online with others. And there's a way to engage in understanding our role in God's mission beyond these gatherings themselves. So all that to say is that this video is just one small segment of that worship experience, and I'd really encourage you to access that material via the email and to join with some others to share that time together. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope that today's learning helps to strengthen and to challenge and to encourage you in whatever place you find yourself today. If you've ever been to my place, you've probably noticed that I have developed a slight, obsession, some might say, over the past few years. I've made a little arrangement here to illustrate this to you. You can see that there's something about indoor plants that has grabbed me. I love a number of things. I love what they teach me about growth. That growth is something that's very slow and it's deliberate, and it takes awareness of the seasons, and it takes sensitivity, and it takes patience. I love that it's something that's challenged me, that I've been able to work at getting better at caring for these plants. I'm not naturally a green thumb, and I was initially very good at different times, either neglecting them or over-pampering them, over-watering them, which both tended to kill them. I love the challenge not only to keep them alive, but to help them to thrive. There's something beautiful and life-giving about being around things that are really alive. Today I want to explore this idea of being really alive. It's an idea of change towards thriving, to flourishing, to find full life. Because this, I think, is really what the biblical writers continually invite the people of God to imagine. This glorious future that God's leading us towards, when everything is once and for all put to right so that life can truly flourish. We're currently spending 6 weeks in Jeremiah chapter 29, looking at the words of Jeremiah to this people who are in exile, and to see what God might say to us through this too. And so I want to do 3 things in the next 15 minutes or so. I want to look at the key idea that Jeremiah gives to these people to help them to live well in a place that they haven't chosen. Secondly, I want to look at a model for understanding what flourishing is. And then I want to offer a challenge to you, a suggestion for you to think about this personally, and for us to begin to think about this as a community as well. So first of all, this passage in Jeremiah. Jeremiah writes to the people of Israel who have been captured by the Babylonians and taken away from their home to a foreign land. And before I read this passage, it's helpful to think about what this experience of being taken away into exile would have been like for them. Everything that they had previously known of a place of life and freedom has been robbed from them, it's been taken away. They've been removed from Jerusalem by force. They've been taken from this land that God had promised them. They've been made a mockery of. They've been utterly humiliated. They've been abused. Their women likely raped. Those who opposed the Babylonian conquest would have been murdered. And those left would literally have been led away naked in humiliation. And the hardest part perhaps for some of those people is that they've been removed from their ability to worship in the temple, taken away from what they understood as the very presence of God himself, and God has abandoned them to exile. You might be able to understand something of what they were feeling if you've ever found yourself in a place that you do not want to be, removed from that place that you called home, forced to spend time with people you don't like, forced into a place where you feel humiliated. Some people may be experiencing this very thing right now, even during this current season. And the thinking of the people of Israel in this place is this, is how can we survive in this place of exile? Let alone thrive like we could in life. How do we survive? Look at what's happened to us. We've had the goodness that God gave to us stolen from us. They think, this is unfair, this is wrong. God has abandoned us. We've been taken from his presence. We're not even able to worship him like we could before. And from that context, these are the words of Jeremiah to these people in that place of dislocation and uncertainty. He says this: "This is what the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, says to all the exiles whom I have sent into Babylon from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." The key to hearing what Jeremiah is saying to these people is to know that the word translated welfare here is a Hebrew word, shalom. I don't know if you've heard of that word. It's a word that's often translated peace or wholeness or prosperity, because it encapsulates all these things in this idea of a place of flourishing of life, where life can be lived to the full, where relationships work, where everything is in order. And as Jeremiah speaks to this people, he speaks against a common idea that in order to flourish in life, you need the perfect set of circumstances. In this passage, he's saying to them, what you need to realize is that you have the capacity to flourish and to extend flourishing even exactly where you are right now. To say that you can't extend shalom in exile is not true. And unless you're careful, you'll enable this lie to shape your existence in the very place that God has led you. Instead, Jeremiah says, the way to flourish is this. First, seek the flourishing of the city where you are. How? Build houses, plant gardens, marry, have children, have grandchildren. Get involved in life, in this new reality. And it's not about becoming like them and assimilating, but integrating your faith in this new reality. And secondly, pray on behalf of the city of Babylon, because contrary to what they feel, exile doesn't mean they can't worship God or that God can't be present with them. It's in seeking God for ways to enable flourishing of the whole city of Babylon that they themselves will flourish, he says. It's in its shalom you will find your shalom. You can look at these words and think they're inspirational and visionary words from a bold prophet. But of course, it's much more uncomfortable in the moment for those people than it is in retrospect. And it leaves the people of God who hear these words with a dilemma. The dilemma is, will they be able to faithfully grieve the loss that they've experienced, while also heeding these words of Jeremiah and making the most of the new situation that they find themselves in? And I think that we too are faced with a dilemma at this time. And it's not only us, it's the whole world is faced with a dilemma, with the new world that's being created. The dilemma for us is, of course, different to the dilemma of the Babylonian exiles, but we are in a place where we need to respond. As a community at Gordon Baptist, maybe the clearest dilemma is that our model for church, what we used to do for church, isn't possible at the moment. We can't go back to church as it was for the foreseeable future. Without trying to predict the future, it appears that this 4 square metre rule and social distancing will be in place for some time, which limits the number of people we can gather in our buildings, and it limits our capacity to invite more people to be part of our gatherings in that building. This being in a building that was already over full for our Sunday together as a whole church. We need to face this dilemma and think about the mission of God that we're part of, to see how this can be used for our advantage, for greater flourishing as a community. In that time in Israel, some of the people hearing Jeremiah's message rejected his message outright. But commentators think that most people accepted it. And Eugene Peterson says that what resulted actually became the most creative period in the entire sweep of Hebrew history. They didn't lose their identity, which is what they might have been afraid of. Actually, they flourished in this newfound reality. They flourished. I don't know what comes to mind for you when you think of flourishing. A key cultural idea for us might be about self-security and comfort and having everything in order. You've got your own house, you've got recognition for who you are, you can take it easy, you sit back and retire. If you can do that, you're flourishing. But the reality is that while some of these things might be part of a picture of shalom, they're not the whole thing. And in fact, when these things are pursued for their own sakes, I think, rather than enjoyed as byproducts of a greater wholeness, they actually work against creating a place of flourishing, at least creating shalom, which is about community, not just me as an individual. I love the way that Andy Crouch describes this idea of flourishing. He describes it as a paradox that embraces these two opposites of strength and weakness. He says that in order to flourish, we need to grow both strong and weak. He depicts it in a 2x2 quadrant like this in his book, Strong and Weak. He says that the vertical axis is representing authority, which he defines as the capacity for meaningful action. It's about how much we can make a difference in our world. Authority is meant to characterize all humans because it's part of having dominion as bearers of God's image. Then the horizontal axis is vulnerability, which he says is exposure to meaningful risk. Risk with the possibility of loss, the risk that when we act, we'll lose something we value. And he says that the extent to which we exercise authority and make ourselves vulnerable determines the extent to which we'll flourish. But when either authority or vulnerability is absent, distortions occur that diminish flourishing. When authority is absent, you end up in the bottom right quadrant, in suffering, where there's no capacity for meaningful action, but great exposure to risk. This is vulnerability without authority. Its opposite, up and to the left, is exploiting, which is authority without vulnerability. Crouch describes this as the most seductive and dangerous quadrant because it's about complete control. As we avoid making ourselves vulnerable and exploit others. But flourishing is up and to the right. It happens when we both use whatever authority we have been given well, while at the same time choosing to open ourselves up to the possibility of real loss through vulnerability. And when this type of flourishing can happen for all, it's a picture of shalom, of wholeness, of fullness of life. But then the opposite of flourishing is withdrawing, which is all about comfort and risk aversion and self-preservation and absolving myself of responsibility for others. And I wonder if for some of us, we're in a season where this season has made us want to retreat, to sit back and be comfortable, because we can. We've got the resources, we've got the ability to make ourselves comfortable. And it's important for us to recognize that, have that tendency, have that impulse, that this is simply a product of where we live, where we have a natural amount of authority. We have a capacity to choose and to pursue opportunity. And we need to both consider how we use that authority, but also intentionally make ourselves vulnerable rather than comfortable if we want to walk toward flourishing. It's interesting to me that maybe our society's view of flourishing, which is the comfort and security of retirement maybe, is not flourishing at all, but withdrawing, preventing not only our own flourishing, but the flourishing of others as well. Flourishing isn't about just doing whatever we as individuals feel like doing. Rather, it's marked by developing a way of life that embraces both risk in vulnerability and proper use of power in authority. And it's this way of life that enables shalom. It's interesting that before followers of Jesus became known as Christians, they were simply known as the Way. They were known as the Way, probably because Jesus says that he is the way. He is the way to life. He opens that way to life for us. But also because these people practiced a way of life that was shown to truly lead to life. If living the paradox of strength and weakness is a definition of flourishing, developing a way of life that embraces both of these things is how you get there. I've got a friend who a couple of years ago redid their whole backyard, including new soil and new plants, new landscaping, everything. It was a brand new creation that she dreamt up, and it was spectacular, it was beautiful. And we were over at her place a couple of weeks ago, and she spoke about having to start weeding that garden for the first time in 2 years since the garden went in. I'd never thought about the fact that you wouldn't have to weed a garden, but in that initial stage you didn't have to weed it. But now she had to. And I was thinking about this in terms of discipleship to Jesus. And I wonder if sometimes we expect, because Jesus has made us new, we'll just automatically become like him. But it's not the case. And for some of us, when we realize this 2 weeks into discipleship or 2 years into following him, we might become despondent. But this is what the way of life is all about. This is what the way is. It's about formation and adoption of intentional habits. Habits of creating beauty, like imagining and designing and planting that garden. Habits of establishing order, like noticing when the weeds start to come out and pulling them out. And protecting plants from bugs that try to kill it. And habits of cultivating abundance, like making sure that these plants have the right amounts of food and water and sun, what they need to thrive. And it's these habits, the regular practices, that forms what a garden becomes. And for us, our habits are about forming a way of life that enables flourishing despite whatever dilemma we might inevitably face. People speak of keystone habits as those that have a domino, a flow-on effect in your life to enable flourishing in other aspects of life as well. And I think of the early church, and you could say that they articulated some keystone habits which might be helpful for us to think about. In Acts 2, it says that they devoted themselves to 4 things. These are the things: the apostles' teaching, which becomes our New Testament; fellowship, which is about participation, as sharing with others who are a part of God's mission; 3, the breaking of bread, which is remembering and celebrating Jesus' ongoing presence with them. And 4, prayer. This is a way of life that they committed themselves to and made them distinctive. And it had a flow-on effect to others in their lives, to positive change in the world around them. I wonder if you've thought about this for you. What does it mean for you to change toward flourishing? What intentional habits of living do you engage in that shape who you are becoming? And how do we articulate our way of life with others in the community? The best way to work this out, I think, is with other people around us who are doing it together, to learn from others what they do and to find a way of life, define a way of life together. This is why I'd encourage you to go through this order of service with others, which includes those 4 aspects that the apostles devoted themselves to of reading scripture, participating and sharing together, breaking bread in communion, and prayer. Maybe you hear this and go, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. I can't think of that. I don't know how to lead. I feel vulnerable doing that. And your natural response is to withdraw. I've been hurt before when I've been in groups with people like that. Can I encourage you to be bold? Also, we're providing material for you for this, to make it as simple as possible to walk through a gathering together. And it's fine to learn and to grow and to make mistakes as you go. This is how we change positively, by stepping out and giving it a go. And on top of that communal rhythm of life in the weekly email, we also have additional resources that we're including there that might help you to change personally as you grow. And as you do this, as we do this together, may we learn to live in the reality of now, using all our power we have for good, walking in vulnerability, learning and joining with others to live a way of life that leads to flourishing. Can I encourage you to pray as you play your part in this? Pray on behalf of our city, for our world, for your neighbours, for your family, your work colleagues, to seek its shalom. Because in seeking its shalom, in seeking its flourish, we too will flourish.